Pipe Network presents.
On this episode of Season 4, Let's Talk.
But I think the most important thing to think about when you saw a story is the conflict, because that's why people go to read fiction or go to movies. They go to see what the problem is, and then how the problem will eventually be resolved by the main character. And so for me, my fiction, my narratives tend to start with a conflict, and then from there, everything else kind of springs forth. So I guess conflict is the answer.
Before we get into this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to whichever platform you are using. And if you want to connect with me, you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and on TikTok at The Rajiv Show. Hey folks, welcome back to The Rajiv Show, and I'm your host Rajiv Doreswamy, and this show aims to help reach out to those who are currently struggling in life and to remind you that life is indeed beautiful when you're inspired to make it your own. Hey folks, welcome back to The Rajiv Show, and this time we're going international and we're heading over to Taiwan. My guest today is an author, phenomenal author, and he's just an all-round amazing guy. Todd Sullivan, how are you doing, pal?
I'm doing very well this morning. How are you doing today?
Doing good. Anyway, could you give my listeners a little bit of background aside from, of course, what I mentioned about you?
So I'm originally from America. I was in America up until I was about 31 years old, and that's right after I graduated got my master's degree. And then I moved out to Asia, and I was in Korea for 10 years. And I've been in Taipei, Taiwan for 1 year. So I've been in this part of the world for about 11 years altogether.
Wow, that's really cool. An Asian experience, Eastern experience.
Right, yeah. Before I came here, I was actually in Tokyo for about 3 weeks, Japan and Tokyo for 3 weeks, doing my master's program. So that was really my first experience in this part of the world. But yeah, I really enjoyed the past decade that I've been out here.
Wow, that's an experience in itself. Wow, I wish I could get to travel like that as well.
Yeah,
uh,
after COVID, who knows? So
my first question is that if you and I were classmates, let's take this back into the past. If you and I were classmates, who were you in high school, basically? If you and I are classmates, were you at the back of the class, always focusing on the books, or are you a sporty guy? Who were you if you and I were classmates in high school?
So in high school, I wasn't well, it depends on what class you're talking about, because, I had strengths in some class and weaknesses in other.
Hmm.
So we were in the math class or science class. I would probably be not very talkative and very quiet, because math and science, unfortunately, are my weaknesses, or two of my weaknesses when it comes to study.
Uh,
But we were in the Catholic high school. And so we were in the theology class. Actually, I would be probably I would probably be the more talkative person in class, in the theology class or the English literature class.
Hmm.
Because in the theology class with the priests, I would ask a ton of questions. So then I was really talkative. And then the literature class, I would ask a lot of questions. So it really just depended on what class we're actually in, which personality I would reveal or show.
that's that's an interesting opening itself. And you mentioned sing. You've traveled a lot. I gotta ask, what was the feeling? Transitioning wise from Western countries to Eastern countries. How was the feeling like?
It was fantastic. I mean, I really love Tokyo. Like I said, I went there 3 weeks for a class, and then I went there again for 1 week for vacation. But it's a fantastic place. There's something about Tokyo and Japan itself, but Tokyo, which is very unique. It's very charismatic. It's something that engages people, because a lot of people from around the world really want to visit Tokyo. That's one of their their goals is to visit Japan at some point. And it's a fantastic place. It's very different. The vending machines are different. The city is built in a different way. The people are different. It's just a very fun place. But yeah, I mean, but it is a very big difference between the Western American and Japan. These places here in general, there's really big difference between them.
To follow up with that, what is that hook that got you to Japan? You know, because from our standpoint here in the Philippines, mostly manga influence is one of the biggest things here that's going around. You know, people love anime and manga as a source of entertainment. You know, especially the young guys, and that's the source to Japanese culture from here from the Philippines. What is your source that got you there? If I may ask.
The same thing, manga, anime. When I was living in America, like in the first anime movie I ever saw was Akira, and I saw that when I was in probably either elementary school or high school. It's very old, and I
Akira.
loved it. And
Wait, is this the
Akira,
Akira, the Armageddon Akira anime? I think.
with the motorcycles, the guys in the motorcycles, and like I think we're talking about the same thing. I think there's only one, maybe there's more than one, but Akira with the motorcycles, the motorcycle games after the nuclear bomb goes off in Tokyo.
Yeah,
Are we talking about the same thing?
I think so.
Okay, yeah, then
I,
that's
I I think because my knowledge of it is Armageddon. That was the first thing that hit me in the head.
well, yeah. I mean, a nuclear bomb happened. Then afterwards, there's it's kind of like a science fiction fantasy type
Yeah,
deal,
yeah.
and there is the world type feel to it. So I think we are talking about the same thing. Yes.
Huh. Wow, Akira, that's that's an interesting one. Have you seen any? What are your thoughts about the latest anime manga stuff? I mean, the quality. I think things are changing now with the digitalized quality of production in anime and manga series.
I mean, the thing is that I love it. That I'm a big fan of Naruto, Dragon Ball Z, Attack on Titan. Like the animes, I simply love it. So I don't really know if, like, I don't know if there's a big change. I guess there's a big change. I hadn't really thought about it that way. But just in general, I can watch animes for like weeks and weeks and weeks, like a single, like binge on a single like title or wherever. So I personally love it. I don't really, if there is a big change, I haven't really been noticed it, I suppose.
For me, when I was introduced to anime and manga, it got me to I think the first few anime stuff that I used to watch, I think was the Ghost Fighter, Yu Yu Hakusho. I'm sure you know
Hmm.
it came to your passing, Yu Yu Hakusho, and I was introduced to it, and then I noticed the quality. One was the quality of the animation, especially as an artist. It used to be traditional, and you could actually see the through the animation to the character to the story that it's hand drawn, and it's like the old school cartoon Walt Disney kind of thing, where it's hand drawn and handmade, and then it was just rendered into animated. And now with the current ones that I'm seeing, I think the latest one that I saw was this All Might. I forgot the name. Academy. Uh, it's a very funny, cool kid who wanted to be a hero. I don't know if you know the story though. It's by the back of my mind. Um, it's an academy. My Hero Academia. Yeah, I'm sure you know this one.
I haven't heard of that one. I haven't heard that one. But as I think of your question now, I see what you're saying. Like, there's definitely been a shift between Akira, which looked a certain way, and
Yeah,
then the newest. Like, I'm a Dragon Ball Z fan, or Dragon Ball fan, like the newest
yeah,
the newest animes. But the funny thing is that you say you're an artist.
yeah.
On my end, honestly, as a writer, it's the story and characters that more interest me.
Yeah.
And so for me, like the reason why I love Attack on Titan is because it's a fantastic story. Like I don't know if your audience are you familiar with Attack on Titan?
Yeah, I've heard about it in passing. Uh it's an interesting one. It's the monsters. I think it has to do with monsters. I haven't delved into it yet, but I'm well aware of this, the summary of it, or the rough.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's
But
these giants who are attacking humans, but it's it's the human story of these people who are in these terrible, terrible conditions. It could not be worse. It really could not be a worse condition. But it's just a story of how these people keep rising up to the challenge. Like that's basically for me the idea of the story. Like how these people rise up, these small little humans rise up to fight these giants, and it's a very fantastic story. So on my end, it's not so much the actual drawing or the animation itself that captures me so much about anime. It's really the story and the characters. And so I just haven't really noticed that whole digital thing, I guess. The difference between the digital and then the old style drawing.
yeah, interesting. This is an interesting point of view. I gotta ask, when you got into writing stories and stuff like that, was your first inspiration anime?
No, again, we're pretty different in age, but my first inspiration was books. It's just
Books,
the
huh?
books that were in my house, the books in the library. That was my inspiration for writing. It definitely wasn't anything on the screen or anything.
Oh, interesting. May I ask, what was the first book that got you hooked into Sing? Do you have a story behind that as well?
I don't know, like, I've read so many books, but I think if you think of Roald Dahl, and I think even today, Roald Dahl, his books, the
Hmm.
BFG, Matilda, The Witches, like these books are popular still in different places around the world. So probably in the Philippines also, you may
Hmm.
know. But I think Roald Dahl was one of the first authors who I thought, wow, I would like to be like him one day. And so it would probably be, I guess, to give an answer to that, maybe him.
Hmm. Interesting, interesting. The one I think I remember reading a book about him as well. I think Charlie and the Chocolate Factory is the one that caught my eye with the
Right,
yeah, and yeah, with the movies. I'm more on the visual stuff. I think yeah, I do
right.
agree with the age. I think the age literally the books started becoming manifested into movies at my transition point. But yeah, it's a fun journey being artist. Um, when you come up with your stories, and I want to take a deep dive into the mind of a writer, if you don't mind. My my
That's fine.
question I gotta ask is, when you get into storytelling and stuff like that, of course the most common thing is writer's block. How do you get over a writer's block when you start, a first page, a first draft or something, when you start your first story?
So I've been taught by a lot of different teachers and a lot of established authors over the last 20 or so years.
Hmm.
And one of them was a woman named Jacqueline Woodson, who writes a lot of YA fiction.
Hmm.
And she first taught me when I was like maybe 19 years old, so it's been about 21 years.
Hmm.
And she was saying there's no such thing as writer's block, which was kind of counterintuitive at the time. But what she was saying is that really there's always narratives around you. Like everything can be spun into a narrative if you just look at it in the right way.
Hmm.
Like for instance, if you right now, if I couldn't really think of something to write about, which doesn't really happen, but if I couldn't think of something to write about, but this between us right now, like us trying to hook up and us trying to have this podcast, that is a narrative. That can be a story that can be spun out into like a short story or something like that. So everything that happens to you is potentially a narrative, and everyone who you come in contact with is a character. So there's different aspects of you as I talk to you that can choose to build a character upon. And so there's no such thing, to me, there's no such thing as writer's block. You just use the world around you. And as long as you're doing that, you should always have something to write about. So I'm not really a big fan of the whole of people who say they have writer's block. There's always something to write about.
Hmm. I like this approach. This is really an interesting approach. I never thought of it that way. Uh, wow, that's interesting. And to follow up with that is, I'm sure I don't know if you get this question a lot. Is that when you come up with an idea and then you build it up, what is the first thing that comes into your mind? Is it the character? Is it the environment? Or is it a story that you've taken from your, you mentioned it's a story that you've taken from your life? Which one comes first when it comes to building that narrative, starting from point A and then building that story?
It does change depending on the situation, but I think the most important thing to think about when you saw a story is the conflict, because that's why people go to read fiction or go to movies. They go to see what the problem is, and then how the problem will eventually be resolved by the main character. And so for me, my fiction, my narratives tend to start with a conflict, and then from there, everything else kind of springs forth. So I guess conflict is the answer.
Hmm. Wow, I'm learning a lot. I mean, I'm always been fascinated with the writing and reading, and for me, lately the book that I've read that really caught my attention is The Godfather. I'm sure you know this, Mario Puzo.
I do.
Yeah. And the funny thing about Mario Puzo is, I don't know, there's this thing, I'm so obsessed. Ever since I saw the first Godfather movie, I've been so obsessed, and I think I've seen it 5 or 6 times, and it's been my obsession ever since. And then when I got my hands over the book, I spent hours and hours reading, and I mean the characters are just, I do agree with the thing is something about literary that really catches your eye and builds, and it's really interesting and fascinating. And I don't know, from then on out I started collecting a lot of mafia books, especially the Mario Puzo collectives. I don't know, there's so much stuff to learn. And yeah, it's interesting. um could you take us back to this one question that I've always wanted to ask? Could you take us back to the time when you first got your first book, and what was the emotions running through your mind when you read your first book?
Do you mean the first book that I got published, or the first book that I read? Which
The
one?
first book that you read that got you into uh got you into reading and writing, basically.
Okay, well, it's been so long. So I guess my emotion of reading, like, let's just say Raw Doll again. I think the first books were probably like Dr. Zeus, because of course you start off with very young books, but it's just been such
Hmm.
a long time.
Hmm.
I mean, what gets me into it is the fact that I get to, for some moments, forget about the world itself. I mean, books for me were always a way to escape, like
Hmm.
escapism. And so
Hmm.
when you're in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, you are Charlie walking through the chocolate factory with all these amazing things happening.
Hmm.
Same thing with BFG. I mean, you become part of the character themselves, and you see the world through different eyes. And I think that was always the big draw for me, being able to see, because the authors, you see the world through the author's eyes, and then you also see the world through the author's character's eyes. And so it's just being able to expand your own horizons, which always captivated me as a young person.
Hmm. This is some interesting stuff. Interesting stuff. Um, before we uh before we continue this conversation, I think we have a let's get into a short break. And we have a lot of interesting stuff. I really love to pick your brains with a lot of writing stuff. I hope you don't mind. Anyway, we'll have a short break and then we'll be right back.
Sandy. Tara na, mag-record na tayo.
Okay, sige. Sige.
This is 480 TV Pod.
the 482nd TV After Show podcast.
This season, we are going to talk about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Tune in every Sundays wherever you get your podcast
480 TV Pod.
from Pipe Network.
Sige na, manood ka na. Diyan ka naman magaling.
Hey, folks, welcome back to the Rajiv Show. And my guest is Todd Sullivan, a writer, a phenomenal writer, and also a phenomenal conversationalist. And I'm learning a lot about writing. And coming back into the conversation, we've been talking about writing inspiration and stuff like that. I don't want to be spoilery when it comes to your novels and your writing, but do you have a lot of influence of Asian traditions when it comes to your novels and your creations?
Well, all the published stuff is everything I've gotten published so far takes place in South Korea. So yeah, I mean that was definitely the influence of it. The characters themselves are almost all Korean. I would say like 95% of them are Korean. So yeah, I mean the culture there, the people there, it all has a significant influence upon the way the novels were written.
And I'm sure research must be tough when it comes to creating these characters.
No, because the great thing, I mean, research, I do a lot of research, but the great thing about living in the country is that the research is right in front of me at all times. I mean, I walk past very old villages in South Korea, in the rural countryside, and I'm on the beach, I see the boats coming in. So the world itself is around me at all times. I was there for 10 years.
Language, how long did it take for you to adapt to the language?
Well, that was a long time. I was there for 10 years. First 5 years, I knew probably less than 10 words in Korean. But then my fifth, sixth, and seventh year, I went to a Korean university to study the language. And so I started to get better at it. I started to learn more, like the foundations of grammar. Funny enough, it wasn't until I taught at a kindergarten that I actually became better at speaking and listening to Korean, because when you speak to adults, they speak like we're speaking now, which is pretty fast and complicated. But when you speak to a 5, 6, and 7-year-old, they speak very slow. And so I was able to practice my Korean with them and actually improve quite a bit in that year teaching the kindergarten. But yeah, my Korean right now, it's just functional. It's not really conversational, but it's functional.
And in Taiwan, how about Taiwan? How was the feeling in Taiwan? What was the learning curve when it comes to language?
I don't know any Mandarin. I know the numbers. I took a couple of classes, but I didn't really have time. And so I only know the numbers for Mandarin. I don't really know any Chinese.
Oh yeah, before I forget, I'm sure our listeners are inspiring writers as well. Do you have any thoughts and advices for them?
So besides the things about focusing on conflict, when you write a story, always try to make the first line, the first paragraph, and the first page as good as possible. I think that's what you work on probably the most, because if you have a good foundation, this is basically anything in life, but you have a good foundation, the rest of the things will be much stronger as you continue to build up. But your foundation is pretty weak, then it's actually gonna not be as strong. So really concentrate on the first sentence, concentrate on the first paragraph, concentrate on the first page a lot, and just go from there.
Awesome. Man, you are really an awesome conversationalist coming from thing. I'm a big fan right now as we speak. I am literally a big fan of what you're doing, and I like to say that there's more power to you and your creations. I love
Thank you.
learning. I love learning from you. And as an inspiration to me, you've inspired me a lot in this conversation. I gotta ask, who is your greatest motivator? Aside from writing, if your motivator is a writer, who is your greatest motivator that keeps you going as a writer and as an artist?
You know, the I guess the simplest answer is trying to balance just regular life with also a creative life,
Hmm.
and that involves the finances. So that's a large part of what
Yeah.
motivates me. Always trying to, make sure I can continue. Because being creative is one thing, but being
Hmm.
creative and being able to like live and pay rent and pay food and all these kind of things, that's actually something different.
Yeah.
So I think that's really a big motivator for me, just being able to continue to write and do the different things that I do, but still be able to maintain a certain lifestyle. I think that's probably a very big motivating factor for me.
I mean, I'm impressed with the fact that you've traveled and you've experienced a lot of cultures, and you become this kind of like melting pot of creative ideas. The and I think that's one thing in an experience that is interesting in its way, and it's powerful, I think. Especially traveling to other countries. That's I think my experience in India, and I think I've mentioned this, is that it's a phenomenal feeling, because one is that culture shock, and that adaptive mindset is the challenging portion, especially the first 30 days, I think, or the first month is going to be the toughest one, which is really is hard. And yeah, and I really admire the fact that throughout the years you've spent the way well, in our previous conversation, I've noticed that you've been really, really deeply motivated by the fact that you had a goal in mind, and you are here being a legend, in your own field. And you are creating worlds that it's more like living the dream and living the life, and then exploring other things around it, and working around it. It's really an inspiring thing. If I may ask, any story that you have in mind that you turned, if you have a story, a personal story that you could still remember, do you have is there a personal story that you that was a part of your life, that you converted it into a book, a novel? If you don't mind indulging us with any stories that you have.
Well, the most recent thing that I'm working on is actually a web series. I'm writing a web series with a group of actors and directors and musicians here in Taipei, Taiwan,
Hmm.
and that's called For the God's Open Eyes. And the concept of it is that we are basing it. It's a superhero uh, web series that's based on African ideology and philosophy.
Hmm.
And so there's a guy who came up with the African. He's from Africa, and he's the one who came up, who has the, I guess, the African aspect of it. But I came up with the narrative and the plot and the characters.
Hmm.
And the narrative comes from my first job here in Taipei,
Hmm.
because it's actually a pretty difficult job. The boss there was a difficult boss, and sure enough, I used that kind of negative experience, because it's quite a negative experience actually, as the basis for the conflict in the web series itself. So my former boss, is like the antagonist of the bad guy in this web series, and then it just shows how she affects the people around her. So I mean, that's the most recent example of using something that was kind of a direct experience and then transform it into some kind of art or creative process.
Wow, I like that. That's turning negative into positive. That's really creative. Wow. I don't want to be spoilery, but that looks fascinating in itself. I hope you didn't spoil the entire book. It was just the opening. It was really fascinating. Uh, I'm excited to hopefully one day get the book and start reading it. It's fascinating.
Well, it's
More
a web
power to you.
series, so it's actually available online. So yeah, definitely everyone can go out and watch it and let me know what they think. It's a group of us here working on it here in Taipei. But yeah, it's just a web series, so it's not really a book. It's actually on film, I suppose.
Oh wow, that's especially okay. That now that's fascinating. Now, Sing, I hope I think I'll put a link in the description on this web series. I'm interested and I'm excited. Pal, I'm so proud, and I'm as a fan, I am so proud, and hopefully I get a copy of some of your books with your signature on it. That'd be fun. Yeah. Hopefully once this pandemic blows over. Um before we go off, if my listeners would want to connect with you via social media, how do they find you on social media, pal?
Probably the easiest way is Facebook, just under my name, Todd Sullivan. Instagram, I believe the handle is Denevius, Denevius. Same thing with Twitter, but I'm probably most active on Facebook and Instagram, so those are probably the easiest ways to connect with me. So I'm also on Patreon. The web series is on Patreon, and that's For the Gods Open Eyes. So if you just do a Google search for that, you'll be able to find it. The books are available. The easiest place is Amazon for different places in the world, or your Amazon equivalent, because like Korea, Japan, Taiwan, I'm sure Philippines all have their Amazon or the internet store equivalent. So that would probably be the easiest way to get the book, either through Amazon or your Amazon equivalent in whatever country you're in. But yeah, those are the easiest places. So just Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, or Amazon. Those are the easiest places to get in contact with me or see the stuff I've been creating.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to say thank you again, Todd Sullivan. I mean, this has been an education. I've learned a lot. This is an amazing experience, and more power to you and your future projects. As a fan, I am proud of you, and I hope you come down to the Philippines and hopefully enjoy a little bit of our culture as well. Because our culture is also one amazing thing, and learning more about Philippines is also a fascinating thing. Who knows? You might write a story. I want to say thank you. Thank you for being a guest on my show, and hopefully, I'd hear from you soon in the coming seasons, if there will be a coming season. And thank you for being a guest in my show.
Thank you so much for having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation. I'm glad we finally did manage to connect. It was really fun, actually. So
Yeah.
thank you so much for having me on.
And for those who are listening, I hope you learned a thing or two with this conversation. And cheers, folks. I'll see you in the next episode.